Are we ready?
We're so ready.
Are we set?
We're so set. Yes! Come on!
Shall we go?
Yes! Yes, you start. You start.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
We've got the same dad.
But we didn't meet until you were 16 and I was really ancient.
So this is the podcast where
we make up for lost time by
sharing an album that
your
brother
should know.
We are here today to talk about an album very dear to me. It is The 59 Sound by the Gaslight Anthem, a record which I think is turning 16 years old this year, which is quite boggling to me as someone that's lived with this album, and I guess it clearly defined a lot of my early adulthood and has now been a constant companion throughout that period. I mean, if you're listening to this, I hope you know who the Gaslight Anthem are. We formed in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 2006, led by the frontman Brian Fallon, who I think to all intents and purposes is the defining feature of the band. It's his lyrics, it's his imagery, and it's his often obvious but yearning chord cycles that kind of really define the band. But despite that, they were really lumped into the punk scene. They did come up as a punk band, despite this kind of singer-songwriter bent that kind of underpins it all, which is very apparent on this record. This was their second album. It's one that I think all the fans would say is the one they go back to. It's the one that's been celebrated with a 10th anniversary release and tour a few years ago. Whilst it's not their biggest commercial hit, it's certainly the one that's gone down in the kind of annals of any Gaslight Anthem lore. Before we talk about the record, though, Dave, I want to know, what did you know about the Gaslight Anthem? Had you even come across them?
Absolutely nothing. No idea. Probably a bit like you with New Model Army last time. I was like, Gaslight Anthem? Is that some kind of Victorian melodrama kind of reference? Are we going to be subjected to kind of, rock chamber music or something like that? I had absolutely nothing at all. Couldn't have picked a genre.
That's interesting because I do think the band name is somewhat misleading. I guess, as we'll discuss, much of the imagery and the world they paint is very retro-focused, and I guess the idea of a gaslight plays to that. Mm-hmm. But I think because that term is so often used in a more modern context now, as in gaslighting, it's kind of an odd choice.
Do you feel you've been gaslit by the title?
Well, I need a more nuanced understanding of that, but I certainly sometimes feel like they're gaslighting me. An Anthem, I mean...
Well, the Anthem bit, having now spent a lot of time with the album, that, they could have just called themselves the Anthems, I guess, but they wanted to dress up a little bit more than that.
Before we go any further, though, I do feel like I need to apologise somewhat. I was reticent to bring this album in because, it's not a seminal masterwork that redefined music. It's not an album that most people might argue that your brother should know. But it's a direct response to our last episode, for anyone that hasn't heard it, where Dave spun me New Model Army, which very,
brilliant,
strong, middle of the road, okay rock band doing pretty okay rock music that clearly left a deep imprint on your heart and soul. And this is my take. This is a record that I love. I would never say that it's among the best releases of this millennium, but of every album released this millennium, it could well be the one I've played the most. It's a great party record. It's a great Dark Night of the Soul record. It's a great exercise record. It's a record that's seemingly so simple and facile, but actually has such hidden depths, both in the aesthetics of the music. There's more going on than you might fear, or maybe I've just heard that, I've allowed myself to feel that. And the lyrics, they might seem cheap and easy at times, which we'll get to, but I think there's a lot more soul and integrity and grit and personality and detail than the cursory listen offers. With that defense, I cannot wait any longer to see if this is going to be one of the moments where you leave me hanging in the wind, or we're going to high five over a new mutual shared admiration for what should be everyone's favourite band.
Okay, so I won't leave you hanging. Yeah, exactly. It's not big, it's not clever, but it's bloody awesome. It's great to spend time with. And so I came to think of it as, run with me on this, some friends of mine have a really lovely dog, right? It's not a pedigree dog. It's not like going to win Crufts or anything. What it's brilliant at being is a dog, and people love spending time with it. So it does cliched dog things. It wags its tail and it puts its little puppy eyes at you and it wants to be thrown a ball at all times. And it's so happy for that to happen. And this album is like that, isn't isn't it? It's not big, it's not clever, it's not even necessarily doing anything new. It's rock and roll, and it's not doing it cynically like my mate's dog. It doesn't know that it's being a dog. But if you can't get on board with this album, if you don't just love spending time with it, if you don't want to basically do the metaphorical version of take out and tickle its tummy and rub its nose and take it for a walk, then you might as well just fuck off and not listen to rock and roll music. You know, you haven't got a soul. And yes, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, but I kind of want to do it quietly because, yeah, there's some things you could say, oh, it's not this and it's not that and it does that and it's all a bit of a cliche and da-da-da, but I kind of wouldn't like to say it to its face. Like, it would be like punching a dog that's really happy and you'd really hurt it and it'd go, oh, but I was trying so hard just to be this lovely, wonderful experience that was happy for you. I think if you want to get hypercritical and all sort of, oh, does it work for you on this level or that level and hoity-toity, then I just think you're being a bit of a wanker with this record because that's not the point. It's just however many minutes of this is great rock and roll. It's brilliant to spend time with it. I'm not surprised it's the album you've listened to most, probably the last few weeks when I've gone beyond getting to know it. Same here, because it's just really fun to spend time with. And I know I'm not listening to a great masterwork, but hey, just as you want to spend more time with my mate's dog because it's a laugh than you do some Crufts winner that would just kind of look at you and probably snarl a bit, you just want to spend a lot of time with this album because it's great fun to be with.
Okay, I'm going to park the dog analogy because, you know, I don't really like furry things. But I get your point, and I think you've hit onto something of a nail there because, yeah, of course you could say that it was very cliched or obvious, or that would be the easy criticisms to lay at its door. But when it's so all in like this, it's not like you've got a bunch of songs that are trying to be different things and then you've got one that screams, we're trying to write a hit or we're trying to sound like a certain reference, which you might come to in a second.
Sure.
But when the whole record screams this kind of honest integrity and this sense of authenticity, and you don't think that this is in any way contrived, and in that sense you can forgive it for that. And frankly, why should rock and roll in 2008 trying to be something new? I would then make one tiny distinction. I think you're understanding a little bit because, yeah, it's rock and roll, but you say rock and roll, to me that is the Stones, that is AC/DC, that is Led Zeppelin, that is maybe the Black Crowes would be the modern version. That would be rootsy music that speaks to the groin primarily.
Okay.
Though this is a bit more than that. There is a certain, I wouldn't say social commentary, but there is a certain, you know, it's painting a milieu, it's songs about people, it's songs about places, it's songs about feelings. I actually would make the argument this is actually a really good singer-songwriter record disguised as a rock and roll record. But first we need to talk about the one thing that we can't avoid talking about. I'm in the squeaky chair, so that's what we cut.
Guest appearance, the squeaky chair.
I don't have space for two chairs in my new green study.
Greenhouse.
Right, okay. We'll get onto the history of the band in a little bit, but you're probably aware they reformed recently. And I read a review of their newest record, History Books, and the great opening line was, no one has ever written a review of a Gaslight album without mentioning Bruce Springsteen unless it was for a bet.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so let's hit that nail. Of course, they're from Jersey.
Yeah.
They write and sound a fair bit like Springsteen, and there was obviously a very, very early patronage.
Yes.
You know, I don't know if you're aware of the backstory, but, you know, Springsteen, you know, he famously went on stage with them at Glastonbury and then again at Hard Rock Calling, and, you know, and he actually guests on their new record, History Books, which just like to drive the nail home. Like, they're not hiding it, and there was a point where they were hanging out. He was their mentor to a certain extent. How could they not dine out on that? Also, how could they not get sick of being asked about it and compared to it in every single interview? Because, of course, they're not. It's not like they're copycats.
Sure.
They're not trying to be the E Street Band musically, at least. But having said that, I mean, I've railed through it, of course. There were like 5 or 6 direct references to Springsteen on this record alone, and they know that.
Yeah, they couldn't have made it more obvious. But actually, I think there's quite a bit in that. And Springsteen isn't the only thing they reference. I mean, blimey, let's take a direct quote from a Counting Crows song and turn it into a chorus.
I love that, by the way.
In High Lonesome. But they've obviously just gone, no, that's what we're going to do. I mean, like, even just like using the word Mary all the time, and like Springsteen's obsessed by it. I don't know who Mary is in Springsteen lore, but Anne Maria, yeah. So what it made me think is you're right in that it isn't just inverted commas rock and roll in the Rolling Stones sense, and we talked about when we did the Rolling Stones album about it, all this thing about his slightly two-dimensional stuff around girls on that album. I think you're right, like Springsteen. See, the other simile is actually the subject matter is quite similar. There's a lot of kind of social conscience and quite personal things, but not just a, oh, you've broken my heart kind of thing. It's more complicated than that. So there is a kind of real singer-songwriter. You're right, you've nailed it. There's a singer-songwriter sensibility played into basically, feels like sort of East Coast rock. But that works. That is what makes them, not just because they grew up in similar place, etc., and shout Jackson. in the middle of a song. You know, they're stylistically really, really similar to Springsteen. You can't avoid that.
So I think the way he writes, there's a lot of kind of those big obvious chord progressions. Often it's 1, 4, 5, 6 are being used. And I've seen footage of Brian Fallon, and actually if you listen to his solo work, that's kind of how he writes. He writes like on an acoustic guitar, like an old singer-songwriter. So I think that's kind of what makes this band a little bit special, in that they are this disparate mash of influences that sounds very, it's certainly not rocket science, but I do think it was probably a little bit against the grain at that point. Yeah, they came out of a hardcore punk scene, right? But they were never that heavy. In fact, they actually got heavier. They probably started a little bit heavier and they got heavier, and this is probably actually their most mellow album, which is why it kind of stands out. But the songwriting, I think Brian Fallon was always writing, on an acoustic guitar, writing these very chord-based, folky songs, which don't really have a lot going on with to them, harmonically. Or he's just got a basic voice and a basic harmony behind it, and some lyrics that are, he's tearing from the scrapbook of his soul. But the band, they weren't all necessarily from the same scene, right? I think if you listen to it, the drummer is probably the most punky. The rhythm section's laying down, saying a lot harder and less groovy than the E Street Band ever aspired to. And the guitarist is often doing these long, winding, high up kind of shoegazy lines, but clean. And then the vocals, it's got slapback echo in it, all right. It's got this kind of soul sensibility to it. It's almost like classic punk mixed with kind of 50s soul production, but fed through a singer-songwriter sensibility. I'd say it's not as simple as being a Bruce pastiche. It just happens that his biggest influences were clearly Springsteen and Joe Strummer, and he's never really outgrown that teenage fascination. But when you're that bloody good, and you're from New Jersey, and you've got that voice and that look, and you can paint that world so convincingly.
Yeah. The sound of the voice I have thought about, because it's such an obvious piece of production for an album that's quite stripped back in its sound. I wondered if it was, because his voice is great, but not brilliant, right? It's just a, everyman voice. And I wondered if there was a kind of like, we found the thing that makes his voice sound the best. And it is this very, you're right, kind of 50s soul. I'm not really sure what the effect is, but it's there and the whole way through. But I hadn't made that soul connection.
Yeah, no, I feel like he liked a lot of soul music, and obviously if you look at the lyrics, he definitely references
Mr. Pitiful,
Otis Redding, Wilson Pickett, and James Brown all get a nod. You could tell that he listened to that stuff as well as the punk stuff. He grew up on the music of the 50s and the 60s, not even the 70s or 80s. That's the impression you get. But he's also quite perceptively realised, I don't think he has a huge vocal range, which is why it's quite interesting that, if I'm not mistaken, he plays like a whole step tuned down, or at least he did on this record. So if you try and play along to stuff, but then he uses a capo, so he's playing an A minor, but it's actually a G minor, which makes it, the chord, the shapes don't work. So I think he's kind of he's dialed in where his limited vocals sit. I don't think they're weak. I think they're incredibly powerful. But I do love that it's something that I can, be jogging around the park and shouting at the top of my lungs and not be worrying about FM and key.
One of the many great things about the album is it does what really great, very broadly rock and roll should do, which is surely a large percentage of people hearing it made me go, God, I really want to form another band, and write some songs, not just like the cheesy covers band. I mean, it made me want to do what they're doing, because they make it sound like it's doable and achievable. You can sing along to it, you feel like you can play along to it, and there's clearly a lot more going on. I mean, one of the key things I think going on that does set it apart is he manages to turn out, especially on side one, chorus after chorus that's a memorable melodic anthem. And on my list of slight, I wouldn't want to say it to their face because I wouldn't want to hurt their feelings, was I think the verses can be a little bit sort of formulaic. They're a bit like la 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 la. But every chorus on side one is a kind of arena-sized sing-along, and that's not easy to do. But because that side one I could listen to and have been listening to daily and not get bored, because it just goes bang bang bang, Great Expectations, 59 Sound, Old White Lincoln, High and Lonesome, Film Noir, and then it rounds off with a slightly mellower track with Miles Davis and the Cool. But that side one, that was it. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that's quite an EP.
Because that's just 5 absolute banger tracks and then a mellower one. As I say, the really key thing is that all of the choruses are incredibly memorable.
Oh, completely. And it's interesting you talk about side 1 and 2, because this came out in 2008 where there was no, the vinyl revival was maybe just beginning. But I did just read that apparently they went into the studio and said, this is the order. Like they knew you were going to start with Great Expectations and end with the backseat and everything else was laid out.
Right.
And the producer was like, what are you talking about? We haven't done the songs yet. And they rehearsed all the songs in that order, like deliberately. And it is an arc. So it was clearly quite considered. And I think coming straight out of the gate, like those first 4 songs, it's like every song, a bit like we discussed with the Strokes record, like every song feels better than the one before. And I actually don't think that Miles Davis and the Cool is a little bit weaker.
No. It's not weaker. It's just slightly more mellow, and I love it. And just on the album thing, literally, this is my last tiny criticism. There's that sound effect at the beginning of a needle going onto vinyl. It's basically they go,
"We're retro!"
Yeah, we think this should be on vinyl. Here's the sound of a needle going onto a piece of vinyl. And you're like, we so didn't need that. We didn't need that from the sound of you anyway. But also for me, the side 1, side 2 thing was just really fucking obvious. They've gone bangers. I love Miles Davis and the Cool, but it's clearly a sort of side 1 closer. It's just a bit more mellow.
Okay, I've got a few things to say there. Miles Davis and the Cool. I mean, first of all, if you're wondering why I fell in love with this band, I mean, if you're going to call a song that, I mean, it's pretty fantastic. And then the fact that you then for the second verse you go like poor Mr. Pitiful, I can't turn you loose. So that's when you're referencing like Otis Redding and James Brown in one line. It's just like
they might as well be sitting in New Jersey going, how can we get Rob Garrett to listen to this? Oh, hang on, Miles Davis, tick. Otis Redding, tick. Oh, do it sounding a bit like Springsteen, tick. Fantastic, And
then, but you're talking about how big the choruses are, and I think, and Don't Wait Too Long to Come Home, by how the years and youth have passed on. I mean, that is one of the biggest choruses to me. That's one of the most affecting. That's one of the most arm-waving, chest-thumping. Oh my God, I feel this. And that's what I mean about it being more than rock and roll. Because yes, it's got that euphoric escape, this thing where you can imagine being in a crowd full of strangers yelling it, but you can also imagine being like having it for you and being like, yeah. But then the closer and the down, down, down from Our Youth to the Ground. I mean, to me, that is like, you're right, that rounds out a side. That is, I mean, it's kind of melodramatic and forlorn, but also kind of anthemic, and that's what I'm talking about, this ambiguity between music that somehow it feels emotional in every sense, where it's not depressing, it's not The Cure, it's not spiritualized, but it's not just, AC/DC or, even New Model Army. It's got that kind of, it's in that emotional hinterland of somehow feels profound and meaningful, but also uplifting. And I think that's what I and possibly you are really responding to. And that's why it's not a punk record.
No, and it's quite remarkable in a way in that I can really imagine, well, I've seen it on YouTube, people yelling along at Glastonbury to this, but I've also really enjoyed it as a kind of direct personal experience on my headphones while walking, while going for a walk kind of thing. So it's got a real kind of great art thing where it feels like it's speaking to you personally, but it clearly struck a massive universal chord at the same time.
And that's why when you say it's kind of big and cheesy and rock and roll, that's why I defend it a little bit, because it isn't big stadium chords. It isn't trying to be Back in Black. It's got this kind of nuance to it where it's quite naked and it's a little bit fragile whilst being kind of poppy and rocky.
Sure,
do you know?
Sure.
So, Dave, we keep talking about all these references. I'm intrigued. How many did you spot?
Well, I've only got about 5 or 6. So let's play. What did you spot on the album? So have you got the following? Bob Dylan in the back seat. There's But You and I Have Been Through This from All Along the Watchtower.
No, I never made that connection. But obviously that whole song it doesn't need stating that it's a play on Back Streets, which was the closing song of Born to Run, Springsteen's big breakthrough record. So I think it's quite self-consciously grandiose to that was his big breakthrough record. He claimed it with Back Streets. I'm going to close my big breakthrough record with The Backseat.
To the extent that when I first heard it for about 2 or 3 times, I heard Back Streets. I thought he was singing Back Streets, and I thought, my God, this is the most obvious Springsteen reference ever. Because, for all those reasons, it's
But I do think he one-upped it, right? Because the Back Streets, Springsteen's imagery was, of course, about, this kind of seedy, safe, unsafe, or maybe community, or whatever the Backstreets were to him. And doesn't he famously say, "Oh, the Backstreets," like 37 times in the song or whatever? It's I love that song, but he does overdo it. So, but obviously the idea of the back seats is actually better because it's like it's private, public space. I mean, the cliche of how many Americans, no doubt, lost their
were conceived on a back seat.
Or conceived in a back seat, or what people get up to in a back seat. I think it's as a kind of homage. It's taken it beyond. It's taken the public space and made it the private, and made it a much more personal, powerful statement. And I think it might be one of the album's best moments. But I could say that about any song on a different day.
Well, it is definitely one of the strongest. But then there's so many strong songs on it. What I'd love to know is all of what you just said. I think I agree with. I'd love to know if he was like, yeah, no, that's what I'm going to do, actually. I'm going to take the public space of Springsteen's back streets and move it into the back seat, and that's going to speak on a more personal level. Or did he just write it with back streets and go, oh, shit, I can't do back streets. I'll change it to back seats. That works.
Well, it's funny.
We'll never know.
Well, okay, the chorus is pretty great. Like in the back seats, we tried to find some room to breathe. I mean, that idea that's the place where you escape, where it's, it is kind of the only space you've got, but it's also semi-public because people can see in, and it's just, I think that's a wonderful imagery. But it's interesting you say that because there is another really quite blatant example where he sexed up a lyric like that. You know the great part of the chorus in the Patient Ferris wheel where he says standing in the Jersey rain?
Yeah.
So in the demo versions, he sings standing in the Cleveland rain, which is so infinitely less sexy. I mean, Cleveland is obviously renowned as like the least, as home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's renowned as being one of the least rock and roll cities in the world. Like, good evening, Cleveland is like the joke of like a touring, touring stadium band kind of thing. So the fact that he changed it in the recording, so it suggests that he actually wrote it like on tour in Cleveland or whatever, and then realised like, that's not sexy, I've got to play to my Jersey roots. So yeah, maybe he wrote Backstreets and changed it. But I think it's a stroke of genius.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's a whole different rabbit hole to go down. Why are some cities or towns inherently rock and roll? If you say good evening, that works. Like good evening New York, that works. Good evening Milton Keynes doesn't work. You know what's that? You can divide the world's major conurbations into rock and roll, not rock and roll, just by putting good evening in front of them and seeing if it works or not. Good evening, Watford. No.
I think it's as simple as the major conurbations of rock and roll and the sub-major, the B, C, D tiers are not.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, on the cusp is Norwich. Good evening, Norwich. No, that's too Alan Partridge, isn't it? And I can say this because I'm from around there. Ipswich, definitely not.
Yes.
A long way from being rock and roll.
Most stadium band you've seen in either city. Like
most stadium band I've seen in either Norwich or Ipswich. I've not actually seen a lot in either city, to be fair.
I think I have attended the football stadiums of both teams only once to see music.
Okay.
But in Norwich, as a wee lad, I was dragged to see Status Quo with my parents, and that was pretty stadium.
Do you know what? That is the epitome of sad rock. Did Status Quo come on and say "Good evening, Norwich"? Because if they did, that I want the T-shirt. That is brilliant.
Probably. I don't remember.
Probably.
I wasn't very old.
That is excellent. And who did you see in Ipswich?
This one's actually cool. REM.
REM in Ipswich. Wow. In Portman Road.
Yeah.
Good God. Who knew?
I bought a ticket off a scalper outside for and everything. I was pretty rock and roll. I just kind of drove up and thought, I'll see if I can get in. Yeah.
I love that. I just wonder what the Michael Stipe and the boys thought of Ipswich. And don't get me wrong, good people of Ipswich. I love Ipswich because I grew up around there and I'm a massive Ipswich Town fan. But it's not. Anyway, so that was quite a lot of cul-de-sacs from my first reference, which is, but you and I have been through this on the backseat. The second one was High and Lonesome Sound. Now, I admit, this is the only one that I didn't know. I had to Google that. I just thought High and Lonesome sounds, where is that from? And it is a term that was apparently coined by a very old country singer, Roscoe Holcomb, and has become the known term for bluegrass music. But he kind of coined the phrase high and lonesome sound for bluegrass music. Yeah, that's really sad minimalist classical music is bluegrass music. Vintage.
Good save.
Very good. Yeah, good save. But it's a reference. They didn't make that one up themselves. Did you get that one, or was that new to you?
I did not get that one, but you're going to mention the other ones in that song, right?
That is the only one I have from that song.
Someone came from Nashville with something in their hand.
Yeah. So, same song, isn't it? Yeah. So, sorry.
And there's also two more from that song that are blindingly obvious to many.
Oh, Southern accents.
So I didn't know that was a song. I always thought he's listening to Southern accents. He's driving through the South and people in the South speak with a Southern accent. I had no idea that was a Tom Petty song. But the line after that...
Southern accents... I can't think of...
Best reference on the whole album, if you ask me.
Go on.
And at night I wake up with the sheets soaking wet. It's a pretty song. Good song, baby. You know the rest.
Oh! So there's a really odd thing there, Rob, because you know my album that we won't mention because that sounds really cheesy, but I use that line in my album. There's one of my songs where I go, and I used to wake up with the sheets soaking wet. when I was listening to this, I was like, oh, I wonder if Brian Fallon's nicked that from somewhere, and therefore have I subconsciously nicked that from somewhere. So is it really famous? Because I use that line in my album that's had all of 6 listens to the world.
The invisible thread that unites you, Brian Fallon.
Yeah, I know.
And Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, hey, I'm one of the crew. Yeah, so where's it
Baby,
from?
I'm on fire.
Sing it to me, Rob.
Gotta wake up with the streets soaking wet. It's a freight train running through the middle of my head. Only you
yeah.
can cool my desire.
Oh, well, there you go. So I've subconsciously nicked it from the boss, and Brian Fallon's probably very consciously.
Yeah, and the way he delivers it, it's over the snare drum. A pretty good sign, baby, you know the rest. It's like knowing plagiarism. But yeah, in this song, it's probably the most packed with references, because we've already got, a direct... chorus straight from Counting Crows. I always kind of sort of wished I looked like Elvis. I love that line because I always kind of sort of, but
sort of.
Like, no one really wants to look like Elvis, but basically saying he wants to look different. He wants to be special. Of course, probably another one of my favourite lines. They're all my favourite lines. And in my head, there's all these classic cars and outlaw cowboy bands. I always kind of sort of wished I was someone else. That's, again, one of those lines that you can wave your hands high in the sky in a stadium for, or you can, cry yourself to sleep with at night. Like, this song is just, if you're saying the song written for Rob, I mean, come on. Like,
Yeah.
What else you got on your hit list?
I was going to say that the guitarist at one point, directly, I think, I haven't done an A-B, but he clearly loves The Cure, because there's a solo in Old White Lincoln.
I mean, there's not really any solos on the record, are there?
Well, no, but the one there is, it's directly from Just Like Heaven from The Cure. It's like, it's almost note for note. It might not be note for note, but it sounds a lot like it. So there is that kind of slight tension almost with the guitarist occasionally wanting to go off and do something a bit kind of dawnful and minor key-ish, and then he's kind of quite often rested back into, no, sorry, get back in your box. We're doing...
But that's why I kind of love it, because his guitar parts are so kind of simple, but they're not. He's always kind of playing something that doesn't sound complicated, but isn't what you would normally expect from this kind of music at all, especially with the clean jangliness. It's kind of deliberately unshowy, and I think it's pretty great.
Yeah. So that's what I have from Old White Lincoln.
Oh, and there's another great line, which again, I didn't actually realise was a reference, but it's one I've always loved, that I lit a cigarette on a parking meter, which just sounds like the sexiest, most cinematic thing ever. I mean, it's something I've never done and wouldn't advise. It's obviously bad for your health, but you've just got this image of some guy with, a pork pie hat with, one leg kind of up uncomfortably folded, leaning on one elbow, puffing away like a gangster outside a jazz club. It just sounds so specific. What I didn't know is that's actually straight from Bob Dylan's Talking World War III Blues.
Fantastic. Didn't know that.
And another line that speaks to me, that was written just for me, and I always dreamed of classic cars and movie screens. It's just like, I don't even like cars, but it just feels that sense of yearning, like that sense of escape. Growing up in Suffolk, it's like, yes,
Yeah, no, I get that. I just think an ideal night out is, because I'm not really into cars either, but actually we both grew up in East Anglia, so therefore just the appeal of getting a classic car, driving across some of the American Midwest while listening to this kind of music, pulling over
outlaw cowboy bands, pulling over Funny Maria with a suitcase,
pulling over specifically then to light a cigarette on a parking meter. That's a night out. That's brilliant. Yeah, I can get behind that. All right, next quote. We mentioned the Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, the song. So that's the film and the novel, then the film. That I have got. There was a soundtrack by K.D. Lang to Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, which I've got somewhere, but that's about as much as I know about the film or the book.
I didn't know that. You've got all the ones I didn't get.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's good. That's excellent. Well, and then there was the kind of just Mary. So the album starts with Mary, doesn't it? Like that, the first line on Great Expectations.
Mary, Maria. I mean, there's just a lot of Mary. The station is playing every sad song.
But Springsteen uses Mary in Thunder Road, The River, The Rising, Queen of Arkansas. So it kind of felt like
meet at Mary's place.
Yeah. So the use of Mary, and obviously in Miles Davis and the Cool, just yelling Jackson. Is that from Jackson Cage from The River? I
was thinking Jackson by Johnny Cash, but I mean, it's like, why is he suddenly?
Okay.
Well, he's singing about Miles Davis. Just suddenly shouts Jackson. Like, I don't. Maybe it's Michael Jackson. I don't know. It doesn't really seem to scan. You're right.
Makes me smile every time. And then my very last one was very obvious, like Poor Mr. Pitiful. But Poor Mr. Pitiful, the Otis Redding song, and that's it. That was.
And then I Can't Turn You Loose, the James Brown reference.
Okay, didn't get that. So, what references have I missed, Rob?
I mean, honestly, I did a quick scan and I stopped at 23. And then a bit later, I did a Google and found there's probably a dozen more at least that I missed. I'm not going to bore you for talking through them all. But yeah, I found at least half a dozen direct Bruce references and a couple more old soul references. There's Can I Get a Witness? Obviously, a Marvin Gaye song.
Okay. Yeah.
I felt the whistle blowing is another Johnny Cash reference. I even wonder if the Sally is like an Oasis thing. But the big reference that...
Sorry, I'm just going to stop you there. Come on, he's quoting Cash, Dylan, Springsteen. In my head, even Kate Grass. What, really, Oasis? Nah, you wouldn't dredge that low. Forgive me, Oasis fans.
So what he did do, though, is grope high. The biggest reference we haven't discussed, Charles Dickens.
Yes. Well, Great Expectations.
And not just Great Expectations, but a couple of the lyrics as well. Marley's Chains is apparently a Dickensian reference.
Yeah. Not Bob Marley. Marley was the... Marley was the original partner of Scrooge, wasn't he?
I've not a clue.
In Christmas Carol, yeah.
And then the reading poetry and books by Estella. Estella was a character in Great Expectations, apparently. So yeah, like he's reaching high and middlebrow. And then there's the whole world of movie references as well, right? Obviously, we've got the Monroe Hips. Got the Hepburn reference. Here's Looking at You Kids, straight from Casablanca, naming a whole song after it.
Yeah.
And obviously film noir. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on things that Brian Fallon likes so much he feels the need to reference and or rip off.
You wonder what it's like having a conversation with him, because obviously lyrics are, they're not you, are they? They're a hyper-real extension of you, and you put a lot of thought into them, or don't, or at least sponge them out at 2 o'clock in the morning when you piss, whatever. They're not you. But does he talk like this as well?
Here's Looking at You, kid.
Wait, Brian, can you pass the tomato sauce and a quote about a film or a book or something comes up? I don't know, because it feels... I don't know that many cultural references at all, let alone get them all in one album. It is remarkable. He must be just a huge cultural sponge, I guess.
Yes, well, his album has 600,000 listens and yours has 6, I guess.
Exactly that, yeah. No, I just quoted the wrong Springsteen.
There's actually a story that during the recording, apparently he only went in with 8 of those songs, and he was they're all sharing in some kind of like travelogue style situation, and he said he was up every night on the kitchen counter, where someone was clanging around and someone was making pizza or whatever, and he was there with his notebook scribbling away. And that's what's funny when the music is so relatively simple and the lyrics kind of seemingly stolen, that he's clearly very, 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 torturing out the soul with it. But yeah, he claims he wrote Meet Me by the River's Edge, Here's Looking at You Kid, The Backseat, and Old White Lincoln, all of them in one night each, while he's working at the kitchen table during the recording.
Wow.
Which is incredible. But also, maybe that explains he's just rifling around his memory of imagery, and maybe that's how he thinks. You know how people have, obviously we have photographic memories, and some of us have great memories for quotes, and he's just recycling lines and chucking them down. But yeah, the result, I think, is pretty fucking great.
Brilliant.
You spoke earlier about side 1, and yeah, I do think those first 6 songs are a pretty spectacular run. The first 4 songs especially, it's one after the other, a banger, banger, banger. Every song feels like it's better than the one before. Is there any that particularly jumped out at you? Because I struggled to pick a favourite, honestly.
No, side 1, I couldn't, literally, I don't have a favourite other than it's one of my favourite side 1s in albums now. In a
couple of weeks. Wow.
Yeah. No, I could. And I don't know how it'll sit in 5 years' time, but I'll probably go back to that more than even The Strokes.
Wow.
Yeah, which given the trajectory of the two bands, is the wrong way around, isn't it? Because The Strokes are way bigger. But no, I thought side 1 was just cracking, and I'll put it on for all kinds of things.
If there was the tiniest hole in the bucket, then I would say I feel like track 5, Film Noir, for a second feels like a come down. I think the verse, because it's like, you're stuck by the side, and then the outside the road. Then I'm like, okay, you're turning me around, the pre-chorus. But then the chorus kicks in, I'm like, you're forgiven. But for 30 hot seconds, maybe 45, I'm like... One more thing I wanted to point out on the title track. Did you notice the creep guitar? Before the chorus, it goes... He does like crunchy kind of like...
Ah, there you go.
And that, again, feels like a reference to Radiohead's Creep.
No, I didn't notice that. I think your 30-second slight lull on Film Noir... That sounds to me like you've been listening to this for 16 years, right? Or 13 years. Believe me, you've found the very tiny crack in the skin after repeated listening. After 2 or 3 weeks of listening, I hadn't got the tiniest bit of any fault at side 1 at all.
So I feel like that means you've got slightly different feelings about side 2.
Well, I have, because I think side 2's very different. I mean, not very different, but
I was going to say
really different. But I'll say from the beginning, I don't mind. I think this is all good because I kind of, if you think about classic albums, I think side 1 blast, side 2 should kind of play around a bit, be a bit more inverted commas experimental, show your range, show us what you can do a little bit more than
nothing
more than
I'd ever accuse this record
bangers.
of being. But yeah.
Well, but so first of all, so you flip the and you go, right, side 1 was great, side 2, can they maintain that? Well, at first you go, the patient Ferris wheel could have been on side 1. It's not like they've gone, oh, we better put that on side 2 because it's not as good. It could have been on any other. I think it's a brilliant and one of my favourites actually, fantastic. But it's
kind of the most urgent song, right? It's the most quote unquote punk. It almost could be like, I dare say, a Green Day song. Like the big gang vocals. Shout about it.
Yeah. So that's probably why I really like it. Yeah, I get that.
But I do think the urgency of the verse that's so good that he sings it twice. The not tonight that opens it and then comes back with it. It's like, you don't know what he doesn't want tonight, but it's again one of those lyrics that's so personal but relatable. Who knows exactly what he's saying no to? Is it like the offer
doesn't matter. You can slot in whatever the not is to your choice. Yeah,
exactly. So it's one of those wonderfully relatable statements that as a frustrated individual on this planet, you can just be like, not tonight.
And then we go on to Casanova Baby, which I think completely does check, because it's, at first I wondered if they'd just gone too far into kind of barroom hoedown. It just feels a little bit more kind of pub rock blues in a way, but actually it's really lovely. But it does have a different feel to it. It feels like a more poppy barroom song. I'll take you home. Forget this dead man's town, I'll take you home. It's just more of a kind of more basic.
It's really romantic, I think. I can hear this in like some dead end town in the UK or anywhere. Yeah. First of all, we've got to say, like, it's past the midnight hour. Obviously, midnight hour, Wilson Pickett. Mustang Sally's left the building. 2 more soul references at least there that we're just going to pass by. Do you hear the whistle wail? Must be Johnny Cash. It's another one of those where he's just throwing these images at you.
Throwing it out.
Always picking on the pieces. I love that. But then it's got this kind of really youthful, kind of idealistic thing that I think you can only feel when you're young and in love and excited, and that's we could run all night and dance upon the architecture. That image, dance upon the architecture. It's both really lowbrow and highbrow at the same time. The fact he's calling it architecture, but he's also like, basically, we're leaving the pub. We're not even going to pay for drinks. We're just going to reclaim the public space in the dead man's town and make whatever architecture, which I don't imagine is Greco-Roman masterpieces in this dead man's town, their own.
In my head,
they're probably a lean off street signs and maybe have a cigarette next to a parking meter.
In my head, it's the town. It's the slightly sort of 70s concrete town fountain.
Yeah.
and they're going to
dance among it. Yeah.
They're going to dance in the fountain.
They're going to bring the romance and the youth and the excitement and the love and the romance and they're just the naivety.
But it patently, it isn't. It's a different type of sound, Casanova Baby. It feels like a bar song, and that's great, but it's definitely a flex of a muscle in a different direction. But then, something I feel really different, even Cowgirls Get the Blues, like the rest of the album all sounds, for me, quite American rock, because it is, like East Coast American rock. This, I don't know what, and you can tell me because you're much more musically knowledgeable than me, this feels more like English blues rock. It feels to me more like a bit Led Zeppy, and it feels to me actually, Free, the band Free, who did All Right Now and did a few albums of blues rock in the early 70s. It's got that vibe to it. The way I can picture it is, rather than a band playing in jeans and plaid shirts, they're more kind of Led Zeppy British blues playing in leather trousers. There's a kind of, I don't know, it's led with the guitar solo. It just feels like a kind of English early 70s blues rock sound than an American singer-songwriter gone rock sound. It just feels very different to me. It's almost like the guitarist has gone, I'm having a song now, and it's going to be led by this kind of guitar lead thing going on. Even though the subject matter talks about a Tom Petty song a lot. I still listen to Tom Petty songs, etc. But musically, it felt very different.
Oh, 100%. And actually, you're very perceptive. I literally just found out today that the guitarist wrote the riff. It may be the only song on the album where they've started with a riff, where it's not just, Brian coming in with a song and they've jammed it out in the room, and it is a little bit of an aberration. I think it doesn't not fit. Again, it's another image cluster monk. You mentioned the Tom Petty songs, but then again, the first line, another one of the best Springsteen references. I haven't seen Sandy, Angry Johnny or Mary, the 3 characters from Sandy 4th of July, Asbury Park, right? Which he'd just mentioned like 2 songs earlier, Carnival Light, 4th of July, Boardwalk Talks. He's literally mentioned the same song like probably 3 minutes on the record earlier. And then he kind of goes back to it. So I haven't actually seen them. It's like the party's over. Like he was singing about the boardwalk lights on Payton Ferris wheel, and now this is the come down where he's going, "Oh, those guys we were partying with, I haven't seen them for a while. They got married, had a couple of babies, but he still loves Tom Petty songs, and you know." And then Little Eden, he mentions Little Eden for the second time, which again is somewhere mentioned in that Springsteen song. But I've Googled, I don't think it's a real place. I don't know if it was a bar or a cafe, but it doesn't seem to be a place in New Jersey. It seems to be like a fictional whatever that he's channeled. And then, it mentioned, "Can I Get a Witness, Pretty Baby, Marvin Gaye, I still have Tom Petty songs." Then you go in for Petty, next line, Little Eden, Bruce. It's like, so 3 references in 3 lines. It's just like, I love it. But yeah, it sounds a little bit different. But it's hardly a dramatic sonic reinvention.
No, but it was really stark to me, just because the rest of the album does have a kind of sonic template to it. It just sounded very, very different. But then, so you got to go, okay, side 2, I've got another banger, I've got a barroom hoedown, and then I've got this kind of, whatever, kind of slightly different sounding blues rock type of thing. And then you go, okay, so just in case you think they're going to go off on all sides of musical directions, no. What we basically finished the album with is a kind of 3-track Springsteen tribute EP. We've already talked about. We don't mind, and it is. But the last 3 tracks. I mean, "Meet Me by the River's Edge." Well, you mentioned the river to start with, so that's the whole river album.
And then the first verse, which he likes so much, he sings twice. I mean, can I just read the whole thing? I love it so much. "I've been here for 28 years. I mean, pounding sweat beneath these wheels. We've tatted lines with your skin." I'm like, this is just over those pounding drums. It's just such a statement of intent. You're like, yes. And then the "No Surrender," "My Bobby G," like mentioning 2 songs off the same album. It's just like, and then to repeat the whole verse, like doubling down, like, I know what I'm doing here. And then we get Eden again, and this is like, oh yeah. I mean, this is another one I love, and this is where the Audrey Hepburn pearls come in, and another like reference to like high culture in a lowbrow. We had Dance Upon the Architecture. Now we've gone the other way around. Now they're gonna waltz the ballet up the boulevard. Which again,
nice.
Now the place is pedestrian, but the dancing has suddenly become a waltz. How do you waltz a ballet? Is that even possible? I don't know. I guess it's a ballet in 3/4. Anyway, no retreats, no regret. Come on.
So for me, I mean, musically, it sounds like it could have come off the river, the album. So the thing I had about it, you remember, I saw an interview with Springsteen a long time ago where he said that the river he wrote to kind of explore where the characters from Born to Run would have ended up 10 years later. That's what he was. He was like, 5 years. So once they'd run, like where had they gone to, what happened to them? And obviously, in the river, a lot of it is about what happened to them was not great. They ended up in the river being a metaphor for trying to cleanse yourself, and bad things had happened and all that.
And I think this to me felt about his sister, if I'm not mistaken, and like he drew out from like his immediate family.
This to me, just in my head, was Brian Fallon go, well, this is like my take on what happened to the characters in the river.
Oh, you're right, because that's interesting, because the beginning of the record is all hope and like romanticism and outlaw, dreaming of outlaw cowboy bands and high top speakers and classic cars and wanting to get away and being young but not having achieved it yet. And then this is like reality.
Yeah, really didn't work out.
Yeah. But no retreat, no regrets. They're still going,
Yeah. Meet Me by the River's Edge. In Springsteen's world, we went down to the river. It's the same metaphor. So first track of the Springsteen EP is from the river. Second one, we get a bit of Nebraska, same sort of musical style.
Nothing on Nebraska is this.
Nothing on Nebraska is. Nebraska's not this romantic, but there's a kind of.
This is why I disagree for 2 reasons. Sorry, but there's a lot more of a rockabilly thing going on with this. The Nebraska to me is pure folk. Sure. It's very slow pick chords. This has got the ding 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 ding. It's that picky kind of like. It's actually musically got more in common with da 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 da. I'm on fire.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But then the other reason is because Nebraska was obviously written about the world around them. Famously, a lot of it was. Some of it was written about the the serial killers.
Yeah.
But it was him. It was Springsteen entering his. I'm no longer singing about myself. I'm singing about America. Kind of phase. Whereas this is the only seemingly, and it could all be made up, we'll never know, but this is the song where you like to imagine that this is actually like a diary entry. This is actually Fallon singing from the heart. So for those reasons, I refute your thesis.
No, definitely it falls down in terms of the lyrical content, absolutely, because it's a personal song about love's lost and
fame or lack of,
fame or lack of, etc. So it's nothing to do with the content of Nebraska. But anyway, it's a stripped back and lovely song, and that's nice. But again, it's that side 2, very different. This would not appear on side 1. This is them enabling, in the side 2, being able to try or do something different. And then we've already
And
talked
probably the
about...
one that would most be like on his solo records and most needed the band the least, even though it's got that nice clapback.
Sure.
The big thing about this song is, I'll be honest, I imagine he changed the names to protect the innocent, but I really do like to imagine and wonder if there is a Gail, Jane and Anna out there, and if they've heard this song. And that's how affecting it is to me, because you like to think... I feel like if I was writing this song, probably the Gail would be real, and then the Jane would be like a half fiction, and then I'd need a third verse. I'd invent an Anna. Another line I love, and the way to serve my coffee with a consolation sigh. I love that line. You can just imagine sitting in that diner.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we get to an album with such lots of best moments. One of the best moments, Backseat, which, well, we've already talked about. It rounds with the 3-track Springsteen EP. This is so... Did it start off as the Backstreets? It's turned into the Backseat. But this song could be off Born to Run in every single way. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a great banger. I think this song is really, really powerful. It's a really obvious anthemic close. I think they used to close their sets with it a fair bit as well. Yeah, it just really, really builds up. And you're right, it does channel a lot of the same energy as Backstreets, but it's a lot faster. I wouldn't say it's punk, but it's got an energy and a rawness and a kind of angst to it that the rest of the record doesn't. And I definitely don't think the E Street Band did very rarely, maybe a little bit on Darkness Edge of Town kind of era, Prove It All Night kind of stuff. But yeah, this is maybe one of the songs that actually stands up as being more than just it's a kind of collage of influences and references and the rest of it. I felt this is, whilst it does have that very, very obvious homage to Backstreets, I think it's transcended that, and I think it says something. Yeah, all those cowboys go crazy in the heat, and you just imagine like, it's just... You sense the claustrophobia, you sense those hot summer nights, and you sense that need for escape.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked our way round through, across, and over this record at this point. I'm really, really pleased you've enjoyed it as much as you have. Question we always ask, where would be the best place to hear it, Dave?
So I am going to do this, I hope, one day. As you know, me and my lovely wife have a plan when the kids have finally left home to do all sorts of travelling. And one of the things we are going to do is take a road trip across the deep south of America and stay in sleazy motels, do the whole Route 66 thing. And so I cannot imagine anything better than, especially side one, just blasting this in an open-top gas guzzler while driving down, start in New York and drive down, and maybe kick the trip off with the 59 sound blaring out for the world to hear.
It's got to be Old White Lincoln, surely the engine's starting.
Yes, we'll have to get an Old White Lincoln. There you go. That's what we do. So,
bravo! I cannot think of a better plan. I'm just secretly jealous that I've kind of done that already. I'm not sure if I listened to this album.
Yeah, fair enough. You're jealous that you've already done it. Okay. I won't ask you where you will listen to it. Where have you listened to this? Where did you listen to it first? And it seems almost wrong for me to say, well, why does it mean so much to you? Because I get it. I think it's a great album. I can see that. But what has it meant to you over the years? And where did you first encounter it?
So a little bit backstory. You know, the band that only formed a couple of years before this record came out, they'd already dropped one album, which was harsher, punkier, but the same kind of idea. There's a song on that album called Blue Jeans and White T-Shirts, which is very beloved, and they actually just re-recorded. And they did a short EP, and then this dropped in 2008. You know, I think it sold well, but it wasn't, you know, they were not a huge band. And there's famously, they were on the front cover of Kerrang! Before the record dropped, because I think the editor heard an early version. And so they were getting a bit of a following in the UK, and they played some festivals, I think, in 2008, and were playing tents. Yeah. And then they came back in 2009. And famously, this is where Bruce and the Gaslight Anthem were both playing Glastonbury. And the story goes, Bruce decided 10 minutes before, he just kind of, apparently they were backstage in their tent, and there's loads of police arrive, and the band are like, what's going on? And then they're like, well, someone's here. And Bruce says, hey, Bruce says, I want to play that song with you. I think that song being the 59 sound. And apparently Brian's reaction was not yes, it was, do you know it? Which is, I think, fair.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah, because that could be awful.
He didn't have a guitar, he didn't have an amp, so he had to use like Brian's second guitar. He only had two and second. Anyway, he played the song, and then instantly that apparently like made sales of the album go 400% more. Shortly after that, Bruce headlined Hyde Park. I think it's the same year Neil Young also headlined Hyde Park, and I had a ticket to go and see both. And I think I showed up late. I missed the support bands, but Gaslight Anthem was supporting, so I got there and ran into the bassist in the band that I would have been in at uni, and he was like, oh, there's this really great band called the Gaslight Anthem, you just missed them. Springsteen came on stage. And I was like, you're kidding, whatever. And then obviously I stay for Springsteen. And this time, Fallon gets invited back out to sing No Surrender with Bruce. So I'm like, who is this guy? Okay, interested. So then later that same summer, I go to Latitude Festival for work and they play there. And obviously I make a point of checking them out, having missed and instantly, enjoyed them very, very much and went out and bought the record. And then in 2010, like a year later, they brought another album. So they came back to the UK. I think they're playing Hammersmith Apollo. I actually turned down free tickets to see Stevie Wonder because I'd already bought tickets to see the Gaslight Anthem. And that was pretty bloody good. And then 4 months later, they came back and suddenly they'd metamorphosized. They're a much better band. I remember the time in 2010, they closed with like Barbara O'Reilly by The Who, and it was really, really weird and disappointing. And then they came back 4 months later. They closed with Backseats. It was dynamic. It was amazing. And by then, the third record had come out and I was on board, and I probably caned those second and third records on and off ever since.
So, I think you've answered my question, which is I've just listened to this album, not another one. This is number 2. I should presumably next do number 3.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the hardcore fans would probably take over the first one. American Slang has not gone down in the annals as well as it should. I think their third record is nearly as strong as this. It's not as surprising. It's not as new. It's not as... But there's actually a bit more going on musically. It's really short for one. It's about 34 minutes long, and it's got a little bit more... The soul influence is a bit more apparent. They're slightly heavier, almost moments, and the lyrics are a little bit less reverential, but still in the same milieu. I think it's a very strong record. And then it's like this. They kind of, each record after that, it's just the law of diminishing returns. So 59 Sound is there. American Slang is strong. Handwritten, the next one, I always remember had like a Nick Hornby quote on the hype sticker, which kind of put me off. And it just felt like them trying to write a Gaslight Anthem album. Like the lead single, 45, is still their best streamed song and most successful song, but I don't think it's their best love song. It's just because at that point they were on a major label being pushed. And 45 is an ode to playing 45 records. It's a bit like Spin the Black Circle or whatever. It's like, it's probably them trying to be the most poppy they can be. And then you can tell they've had enough by the fifth record, Get Hurt, where they go really kind of heavy, but not that heavy. And I think even the band have kind of done with that record, to be honest. I haven't spent enough time with the reunion stuff, but what I will say is listening to especially the new EP they just dropped, it's kind of great, but it's the production again is what lets it down. And I think this is why I realised that 59 Sound is really special, because the songs are all there, but it's got that kind of big anonymous kind of post Foo Fighters kind of, everything's big, everything's compressed, all the guitars are loud and large and distorted, but not too distorted. It's very chuggy, but it kind of sounds like everything else, and that's why I think 59 Sound does stand up for its cleanness. And that's just something we haven't touched on. Maybe it's a good place to close. Do you know why the 59 Sound is called the 59 Sound?
I do not. What is the 59 Sound?
Exactly. Brian Fallon, being the nerd he is, fell in love with this particular sound, I think a Fender Bassman amp from 1959, which apparently is used on all those classic records like Sam Cooke and Wilson Pickett, no doubt, and all those things we were talking about. I think the session guys were using this special amp. Apparently Bruce had one too. Obviously they're very expensive. He couldn't buy a vintage amp, but he basically built one, and he was looking around for the right magnets and whatever in Deloitte. Apparently he's messing around for ages. He finally built one. He built the amp of his dream, and he made the amp, and then he wrote a song about it, only he didn't, because this is the weird part, even though it's such a great song, the song's kind of about a friend that died, right?
Yeah, it's not cheerful,
But I guess the chorus is his nostalgia, them talking about the music they would listen to, but really it's about him finally building the amp of his dreams. And that's why on this record, he plays with like no overdrive at all. It's just like, I think he's just got like a compressor or something, and straight into the amp, and that's it. And that's why it sounds
so it's just
not like any other punk record. And even the lead guy, he's not really using any gain, right? It's jangly as hell. And that's it. The new stuff, when the heaviness actually takes away the balls, if you know what I mean.
Okay. All right, so I need to give the third one a go first then, which is, what's it called?
American Slang. And then I go back to the first one, Sink or Swim.
Thank you very much, Rob.
So, as is tradition, Dave, will any of the songs on this album be joining the likes of Daft Punk and The Strokes on your famed Hipster Dad barbecue playlist?
Yeah, easy. I'll just put side one on. That'll work. That's the first half hour of a barbecue done, isn't it? Side one, all the way through. Well, and just probably turn it off after Patient Very Wheel, because Casanova Bay would work as well. All of it, but as all the album on shuffle, basically, it's going to work. So yes, thank you for an album I will listen to again, and yet another addition to my barbecue playlist.
So we are now approaching the last episode of season 1, and then we are going to do a look back on the first 12 episodes. We're coming back to you with 12 new albums. But so, Dave, the suspense is killing me. What is going to be the final episode of season 1?
Well, I've mentioned Elton John quite a bit, so I thought we'd better get some Elton John in before the end of season 1. And anybody that knows Elton John's albums in detail will know that's a challenge because he's done a lot of different albums, many of which were brilliant in the 70s, but all of them came with a fundamental flaw. I've really struggled with knowing which one to pick, but I am going to pitch to you an album from 1971 called Madman Across the Water by Elton John.
I'm just glad you didn't pick Jethro Tull.
Coming through into season 2.